Having racked up to 40 hours in the most recent Arc Raiders playtest, I firmly believe this game will fill a significant and an important gap within the extraction shooter space. Given that there's an NDA in place, how do I convey why it's so important that it accomplishes this goal without breaking it? Well, I'll tell you a story and how we got here. Okay, before we get started, I wanted to say if you enjoy this kind of content, extraction shooters, and are excited for Arc Raiders, I want to encourage you to hit that subscribe button. I plan on making Arc Raider content the moment I can, and I'm excited more than you know for the opportunity. With all that being said, what's about to follow is my opinion. You can disagree, leave a comment down below, plead your case, and I'll be happy to have that discussion. With that out of the way, it's story time. Based on all available data, I am older than the average gamer and certainly older than most of my audience. So what I'm about to go over isn't based on reports, figures, or takes from other videos, etc. I've seen it and observed it with my own eyes.
I was there when it was written.
Moreover, I've worked for a couple of gaming companies in my life, so I've seen and heard more than most of what goes on behind the curtain. So before I get into Arc Raiders, I'm going to give my statement on why it's important in some context. A theme I think you'll soon pick up on. It is not uncommon for a game to release in one form or another that has such a large impact and creates a whole genre or subgenre within the gaming industry. This usually happens because a game is so successful that it catches the attention of other studios that want their piece of that pie. The pattern usually follows three phases: Pioneer phase, the free-for-all phase, and a stabilization phase. In the Pioneer phase, a game or a couple of games get made that prove a concept can be financially successful. Then other games follow suit. This is then the free-for-all phase, where games struggle to establish themselves. At this stage, it can be very tenuous. Games rise to the top and many fall by the wayside. In this phase, even pioneer games are at risk if they aren't established well enough or adaptive enough to the competition. And then finally, things start to stabilize, usually in the form of 2 to 3 major players. At this point, any newcomers need to be extraordinary in order to survive, let alone thrive. 3 major genres follow this pattern. First 2 are MMORPGs and MOBAs. We'll talk about the third in a second. But shooters, because of their natural popularity, were both stagnant and fracturing at the same time. The big 2, Call of Duty and Battlefield, more or less stood unchallenged for over a decade. While subgenres were around, your arena shooters, your hero shooters, and milsim shooters were cropping up here and there, but they really didn't create enough buzz or success that pulled away from the dominant titles. They found their target audience and pretty much served them as best they could, until one mode had enough impact that challenged that landscape. Now before I get into that, I want to set the stage on why it happened. You see, shooters, while fun and exciting, don't really lend themselves to being a memorable experience on their own. 95% of the time, your memory of that individual match is gone in minutes. The level of impact isn't long lasting. You often talk about the game in isolation. I went off on that match. I went 20-3, and that's about the majority of what you're going to say. Now, of course, there could be a lot more context. The story can go more like this. Man, I've been trying to break into diamond rank for the last 2 weeks, but I kept on getting bad teammates. But yesterday, I went on a tear. I had 5 wins in a row. The last one, I got so many kills, I doubled my team's score, and I finally made it to diamond. For now, I'm playing unranked for at least a couple of days, just so I can look at that rank longer before I'm likely going to lose it. You see, there's a prologue, there's a context, there's a goal, a peak, a triumph, and an epilogue. But that's an awfully specific scenario that we as gamers know it ain't all that common. And so enters the Battle Royale. This setup gives you the chance to have a compelling story every single match. You start off with nothing, and with a combination of luck and skill, you gain more gear and more power, working your way to an objective with tactics and strategy. You will have a fraction of the fights and kills in this mode as you would while playing a typical PvP match, but they will be more memorable. And this is because you'll have context in which to frame it all. The natural next step is to have an even greater context to which to frame it. Battle Royale start and end in each match. You lose, you start again. You win, you start again. And that's basically it. There's nothing wrong with it, just is what it is. And for many, that's about as much context as they need in order to be satisfied before it steps over the line and becomes more stressful than it is fun. But for some, they want more. And then a natural evolution happens. Enter the extraction shooter. You take all of that in-match story potential, and now you add an out-of-match story arc. The gear you've acquired or lost adds to the next run's context. Items of note you pick up carry their own story and how you got them. Over a year later, I can still remember specific raids in the Cycle Frontier, and I am sure many others here who have played extraction games could recall something similar. The experience itself isn't what stands out, it's the context that frames it that gives it weight. I could play a Call of Duty match, knock out 50 plus fights with 40 plus kills. Yeah, I'm kidding myself, of course. And while it may be very fun while I do it, I likely won't remember a single kill or fight after the fact. With enough context and intensity, however, I can remember a raid with the 2-ish fights I got into weeks, months, or even a year later. And that's because it's not just an extra number on a KD ratio or the restart of a match. It's because the individual actions or moments have such huge potential consequences attached to them. And this brings me to why Arc Raiders has the potential to be so important. It's no secret that Escape from Tarkov is the pioneer game of the genre, but is it really the king of the genre? I mean, that's what people say, right?
I am the king! I will punish you.
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
The Division's Dead Zone is probably the earliest attempt at this kind of mode, but Escape from Tarkov is easily the one game that has had the biggest impact in the attention that this genre has gotten. But its style is a niche within a niche. As I stated earlier, milsim games have always been less popular than their more action-oriented counterparts. And by their very nature, extraction shooters are also a niche genre. In addition to this, Escape from Tarkov has no shortage of players with over 1,000 hours in the game that can write entire books about what things they don't like about it. So that begs the question, how has it survived for so long? At the risk of being overly simplistic, lack of competition for the majority of its life cycle could explain it. Escape from Tarkov has been available for about 8 years now, not including the development time before that. That's 8 years to build content. Players may quibble about when the game was at its best, but that's not the point. The point is, in the misguided notion that Escape from Tarkov is a model for the genre as a whole, many development studios have made and are still making attempts at a direct competitor to it. Not just an extraction shooter, but a milsim extraction shooter. Imagine a MMORPG or a MOBA trying to compete with the likes of World of Warcraft or League of Legends by being essentially the same game with significantly less content. That sounds crazy, and the results are very predictable. But what's also important to understand what makes Escape from Tarkov special is not that it's a milsim extraction shooter, but the scaling of its gear value. In some cases, you are risking days or weeks worth of effort that it took to gain the gear by running it in a raid. In my opinion, its milsim nature doesn't make it hardcore. This does, because it ups the ante on the tension you feel in a raid. I firmly believe there is an audience that would enjoy the idea of an extraction shooter, but not at the level of intensity that Escape from Tarkov demands of you. On the other side of the spectrum, you have Hunt Showdown. As I've outlined in detail in my breakdown of the extraction shooter space as a whole, video linked above, Hunt represents the lowest possible tension an extraction shooter can be before you no longer provide the tension and context that makes the genre work. It has other issues, of course. Many are not fans of the paranormal Western theme that it uses. This tracks with overall gaming trends and gamers' preferences towards settings that have automatic weapons and sci-fi elements when it comes to games that actually have guns in them. Then there's the upcoming game Delta Force, which seems to try and ride that middle ground. I've stated before that because of several factors, I believed that Delta Force would likely become the dominant model game for the genre, but I'm not so sure anymore. While I have no doubts that Delta Force will be successful on the whole, its extract mode is a little disjointed. The arcade-style movement and hero shooter operators complete with built-in skill sets give you a casual experience and feel, but it has a bullet tier based damage balance system. This model is the same as Escape from Tarkov and every other extraction shooter that has tried to compete with it. In my opinion, this creates an experience that could effectively circumvent the accessibility that Delta Force would otherwise have. And so, this finally brings me to Arc Raiders. By all available public information, Arc Raiders is attempting to land directly in the extraction shooter space in a way that makes it accessible to the general audience, while also retaining the context and tension it needs. The sci-fi setting helps a lot with this. With a consistent framework, developers are not held to realistic gun models or armor physics. The equation becomes much simpler with 3 questions. Within the context of the IP, does it make sense, is it balanced, and is it fun? That's a tremendous amount of freedom to work with when it comes to making gameplay decisions. Embark have shown themselves perfectly capable of managing a live service game with strong content pipelines and fair monetization practices with the finals, and likely learned lessons that Arc Raiders will benefit from. While the finals is free to play, I think because of the nature of extraction shooters, making Arc Raiders a paid product is better in the long run due to cheating concerns. To top this off, it's going to be cross-platform, which makes its potential audience exponentially higher than most of its competitors. Bottom line, the potential is there, they just gotta stick the landing, which only time will tell if they can. To say I am excited to go along for the ride is an absolute understatement. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and good hunting.